I woke up in a German hospital with the German nurses working on me, and I knew I wasn't dead because angels don't speak German. This is what an American parachutist nicknamed Jumpin Joe said later in life, recalling an experience he had during the Second World War after the Gestapo hospitalized him through torture. It's a great quote from a great story, a story of perseverance and humanity in the face of untold horror, a story we're going to share with you now. It begins with the birth of our protagonist, Joseph R. Beyrle, in the city of Muskegon, Michigan in 1923. Beyrle's parents, funnily enough, were of German origin and had moved to the States before the turn of the century. Unfortunately for them, they had to raise their son during the Great Depression. Times were tough for Beyrle, and after he graduated from high school in 1942, they got tougher. But this was by choice. In the words of a much older Beyrle, "My family don't understand that I felt it was my duty to volunteer as a paratrooper for the US Army and what went on in the war and what it was like. I tell them that if it wasn't for what we did, they would all be marching the goose step today, and the first question they ask is, what's the goose step?" It was during the completion of basic airborne infantry training that Beyrle earned the nickname Jumpin Joe. As part of their training, paratroopers had to, as you might expect, practice jumping out of planes. Many of them were worried they'd roll an ankle or snap a leg during these jumps, so they paid Jumpin Joe a few bucks to make the jumps for them using their names. After Beyrle completed his training, the army assigned him to the Screaming Eagles, aka the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment of the 101st Airborne Division. The unit was stationed in England in the lead up to the Allied operations in occupied France in April and May 1944. As a radio communications and demolition specialist, Beyrle participated in at least 2 clandestine missions whose objectives were to deliver gold to the French resistance. Then, on the 6th of June, Beyrle's world was flipped upside down. En route to blow up some bridges behind Operation Overlord's Utah Beach, Beyrle's C-47 Skytrain came under attack, and his team was forced to ditch at low altitude, far from their targeted drop zone. Despite having just 110 meters or 360 feet between him and the ground, Beyrle survived the drop. And now, he was alone behind enemy lines, with no way of contacting his fellow paratroopers. Instead of freaking out, Beyrle decided to blow up a power station. He then continued to blow shit up until, a few days later, the Germans captured him. Things got pretty grim for Beyrle at this point. He was moved from prison to prison to prison, and in this time, 2 of his escape attempts ended in capture and reprisal. According to Beyrle's daughter, Julie, "Dad had a dent in his head. It was very visible. I remember putting my finger in it. When I would ask him about it, he said, 'A German got mad at me.'" In his 3rd escape attempt, Beyrle and his fellow escapees managed to get clear of the prison, only to mistakenly board a train to Berlin instead of Poland. This time, after his inevitable capture, Beyrle was turned over to the Gestapo. In Beyrle's words, "I'd resisted interrogation before, better than most. But under the Gestapo, I was not being interrogated, just tortured, extremely tortured for the pleasure of the torturers." While they weren't angels, someone was looking out for Beyrle, however. Learning of Beyrle's predicament, some German military officials surmised that by holding on to a military prisoner, the Gestapo was in breach of its role as a civilian police force. If Beyrle was going to be locked up anywhere, it would be in a prison run by the German military. Freed from the Gestapo, Beyrle was treated by the German nurses we mentioned at the start of this video, and then transferred to Stalag 3C POW camp in western Poland. And once again, he managed to escape, this time for good. It was January 1945 at this point. Beyrle had been between POW camps for about 7 months, and he was, understandably, pissed off. So he decided to head east, hoping to run into the Red Army and rejoin the fight alongside the Soviets. Bumping into a Soviet tank battalion, he raised a pack of Lucky Strike cigarettes and shouted "American comrade" in Russian, one of the few phrases he knew. And it seems that his cigarettes did indeed bring him luck. The battalion's commander, a woman named Alexandra Samosenko, took some convincing, but finally allowed the American stray to join her in her war against Germany. Beyrle's son John later discussed this event in an interview, stating, "I think Dad was amazed, and frankly a lot of Russians to this day are amazed to find out that women commanded tank units at the end of the war. He was just delighted to be in friendly hands. They gave him a weapon and allowed him to ride along." Over the next 3 or so weeks, Beyrle proved himself a worthy addition to the tank battalion by using his demolition skills to obliterate trees blocking the unit's advance. Under Samosenko's leadership, Beyrle even helped liberate the very POW camp in which he'd previously been held. Unfortunately, Beyrle was wounded during a German dive bomber attack soon after. This saw him transferred to a Soviet hospital. As if Beyrle's story wasn't bizarre enough, none other than the indomitable Marshal Georgy Zhukov visited him during his recovery. Through a translator, Beyrle told Zhukov his story, and Zhukov must have liked it because he organized Beyrle to rejoin his American brothers in arms. When Beyrle arrived at the US Embassy in Moscow in February, he learned he was, in fact, dead. Well, that's what the records said, and what everyone back home believed. They'd even held a funeral for the poor bloke and published his obituary in the Muskegon newspaper. While the embassy confirmed Beyrle's identity via his fingerprints, Beyrle got to chill under the watchful eye of the Marine Guard in the Metropole Hotel in the center of the Russian city. With his identity confirmed, the embassy returned Beyrle to the United States in time to celebrate VE Day. And what a story he had to tell his fellow celebrants. But life goes on, and Beyrle had to set the war aside and make a return to civilian life. He got married, had kids, and worked for Brunswick Corporation for 28 years. However, he didn't seek to wholly forget his time in Europe. 20 years after he leapt from that smoking C-47 on D-Day, he returned to Normandy to reflect on his experience alongside some other American veterans. One such veteran, Donald R. Burgett, had the following to say: "I didn't know Beyrle very well, but I sure knew he could shoot and was one hell of a guy. It's good for us to remember the sacrifices that were made by men like him in liberating France." On D-Day's 50th anniversary in 1994, US President Bill Clinton and Russian President Boris Yeltsin awarded Beyrle service medals for his bravery in the war. He was a hero in the eyes of the Americans and Russians both. According to Beyrle's son, "My father's great fear was the slow slide into oblivion, a nursing home or worse. He always said, 'When I go, I want to drop and skid along the ground.'" And while Beyrle didn't get to leave this world in such a drastic fashion as that, he at least avoided the nursing home. During a visit to Georgia, where he'd trained as a paratrooper and earned the nickname Jumpin Joe back in 1942, he died in his sleep. But his story lives on, and we'd love to know what you think about it. Had you heard about Jumpin Joe before today? Do you know of any other Americans who fought in Soviet units during the war, or vice versa? Is there anything about Beyrle's story we missed? Anything we got wrong? Let us know any thoughts in the comments section below, and as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.